chaps, I've got this guy who's been quite a bit of a supporter. That made no sense whatsoever, did it really? But he's been supporter of Manup for. Did you come to the first event?
I did, mate. Yes,
you did. It feels like an absolute lifetime ago.
It really does, doesn't it?
And so, but I think one thing I'll say to you, mate, is because I've seen you pop in and out of comments and discussions on Manup, well, for 2 years now, and it's you supporting your comments has actually given me faith and strength up to a point to carry on doing it, because I think it's because of some of the topics we talk about, we get the views, we get the messages, but we don't ever get any interaction on them. Because let's face it, some blokes don't want to, they'll message stuff privately, but they don't want to associate with the page what talks about, and that's cool. I'm cool with that. Absolutely cool with that. Can you hear the voices out the window, by the way?
I can, but they're not distracting me.
Right, okay. Anyway, Tim, very quickly, but tell us about yourself, mate. Why do you support Manup? What is it with you, mate?
My into Manup came through a mutual friend of ours, Mick Richardson. Now, I knew Mick as a police sergeant. During my own time, I was police officer myself from 2000. I was medically retired 2015 with complex PTSD. And also the bedfellows, depression and anxiety, which pretty much all go together, don't they?
Yeah.
My PTSD came from my job exclusively and from incidents that I dealt with during the course of my duties at work. And Mick gave me a heads up for the event, really, because I was already slightly involved with various mental health initiatives, and I was pretty much kind of pushing the whole thing about, listen, guys, talk about it, be open, fly the flag. So Mick pinged me about the event that you've got in Ipswich, and that's when I came on board with you, really.
Well, okay. Wow, okay. But because your beard wasn't as big then?
My beard was not as big then, no, not by any sort of measure. No.
Oh, okay. So where you at with the whole PTSD thing now? You're quite clearly in a good place now, are you? Or?
I am in a good place, yeah. I mean, I've had various forms of treatment, as most of us have with PTSD. Most of us have been through a bit of a mix, haven't we? I think some CBT, some generalized counselling, which I found was next to useless. And luckily for me, I had a period of EMDR through the NHS, which was an absolute life changer for me. It really was. Up to that point, I'd been in a situation where I'd be having panic attacks in my sleep. I'd scream myself awake at night. I'd have repeat nightmares. I'd find myself fighting my partner in bed almost every night. You know, my sleep was like that all the time, really. And my flashbacks were not all day, every day, but I'd be having flashbacks every single day. And I've gone now to a position where, I get flashbacks occasionally. I can manage them. I can manage most of the intrusive stuff. And the big thing for me, Dan, was anger, really, because when I came out of the job, when I was retired, I was a very angry man. I was very unhappy with the world. I got a big chip on my shoulder. You know, a friend of mine said to me during my operational time, you've got an issue because the public has become your enemy. And that was the truth. It really was the truth. So, now here I am, 2021. I think I'm fairly chilled out and I'm in a good place with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bloody hell. So those facts, obviously I don't want to trigger you, so
you can ask me anything you like. I'm pretty strong, so
no, okay, no, that's good. So those flashbacks to do when you were a copper, basically, was it?
Yes, they were. Yeah, all incidents that I dealt with at work. My most serious incident, and I'm happy to talk about it if you want to, came from a domestic. I was attacked by a guy with a samurai sword at a domestic, which I'd gone to double crewed. For obvious reasons, I won't rehearse the whole incident, but from my point of view, long story short, I ended up having a fight with the guy. I disarmed him of the weapon, and other officers arrived, and eventually he was cuffed and removed. And I had some issues with that fairly immediately, to the point where I dealt with Mick Richardson at the station. Actually, I went back to the Nick that day, and Mick was like, "You're not good. You're not okay."
Yeah.
And that opened up very quickly, really. Within days of that, I got into a position where my sleep was starting to be eroded and my mood changed. Yeah. So that was the single main incident for me, really. And I am happy to talk about it. I'm able to deal with the consequences of doing that. And I think it's part of being open with people, really.
Can I ask one thing, Matt? Maybe it's two things. I think it's just how my head works. Because I could imagine your family would be like, you need to give up the police force because it's bloody dangerous. It's a job I wouldn't want to do. But other than Mick, but also your colleagues, because you survived that, you took down a man with a bloody samurai. That's pretty heroic, that word. That's pretty hardcore. So you kind of stuck between that thing of like your family's scared for you and are probably having a whinge saying you need to leave, and then on the other thing, you're a hero and all of the Maxillian blah blah blah. Did that not mess you up a little bit?
Yeah, it did, absolutely. Yes. And it's a very good observation because the contradiction between the two things was quite problematic. I dealt with a series of edge weapons, and that was one of a number, really. I had a guy cut his wrists in front of me. I had a guy put a couple of knives on the street whilst I was dealing with him on a night shift. So there was a bit of a build up, and I did develop something of a reputation at work. It became a bit of a joke about, well, our walker's always around edge weapons, and ha
Yeah,
ha ha. Which, so yeah, there was a bit of macho in that. But as you say, and you're quite right, my friends, my family particularly, were saying, well, this is not good. You're not well. You need to take a step back from this. And juggling the two things became harder and harder with time, really.
yeah,
Yeah, it did.
uh,
I mean, at the point when I retired, I'm not bigging myself up in saying this, and I don't do that. This
yeah,
is not a thing I talk about very often, but I retired with a chief officer's commendation. It's not a thing many people will ever see. I put it in a bin, it's gone, it's history.
yeah,
I had a series of merit awards for things that I'd done, no more than other officers do.
yeah,
There are plenty of officers that have done far more than me, but I couldn't live with them. It was a strange thing because I ended up thinking, well, I've lost my career. I'm in this position now where I'm not able to do it. I don't want this stuff around me anymore. So
yeah.
it
No,
went. And now I regret that, if I'm honest.
yeah. Oh yeah. And so how did you rebuild yourself then? Because you sound to, obviously I've spoken to you many times on Facebook and all this kind of stuff. How did you manage to go, right, enough's enough, I need to sort myself out?
It's a good question. I didn't like the person that I'd become, really. And that was for me maybe the single worst part of dealing with it was, I knew that I was a very angry man. I was on a hair trigger all the time. I mean, there were situations like driving in a car where I was a nightmare. I'd be looking for rows. I'd be in road rage situations repeatedly. I couldn't control myself, to be really blunt, and I hated it.
Yeah,
And I took a long, hard look at myself, and I thought, I confronted myself with it really in terms of, well, what have you become? This is not you. This is not the person that you are. This is an illness. You want to ditch it.
yeah,
I don't want this to be the rest of my life. So I dealt with it through a series of things. The biggest single one was exercise, really.
yeah.
Bird watching was really good for me. I got very much into bird watching because you do it alone. It's very peaceful. Being
Twitching,
around nature was very healing.
twitching,
And
isn't it? Is it twitching?
yeah, twitching,
Right,
absolutely. And
okay.
there was a
Yeah.
bit of twitching in my case. I would twitch as well. So yeah, there was some of that. And I dealt with things in patterns. I'd say to myself, for instance, right, you're going to go running. You're going to run for 6 months, then you'll change tack and do something else.
Yeah,
And through that, I think I really started to get a handle on it because the sleep started to improve, my general mood started to improve. Through doing those things, I came off medication when I was ready to. And I've been taking meds for 10 years, probably. I mean, I've had the anniversary of that this week. It's come up in my Facebook feed, actually, 2018, where I was meds free. I have been
yeah,
ever since. So, I would go from step to step, and I used each one to reflect back and think, well, you've achieved that. If you've achieved that, you can achieve your next goal. So move on.
no,
And that was how I dealt with it, really.
yeah. So was there any charities or anything like that were help? Because I remember you said one type of counselling didn't work for you. Is that right? Did you say that, or am I making that up?
Yeah, I did. And yes, I think, other guys with PTSD, this will probably chime with, and maybe other mental health issues. But, from my point of view, I was referred to a series of women who I would describe, without being rude, as probably all white, middle class, middle aged, very well meaning, very nice ladies who got no idea at all what I was talking about. And I didn't find it helpful. I would talk about being angry. I'd talk about how it made me feel. And I'd come out thinking, well, I'm going through emotions here. This is
Yeah,
this is not really touching any of this at all.
yeah,
So that was the therapy and counselling that I did have no luck with, really. It just
yeah,
didn't work for me.
yeah. That's fair enough. So how did you move on to something what did work for you?
I had a bit of luck, really. I had a repeat prescription appointment at the doctor's, and I've been
Yeah,
seeing my particular GP for a long time then. I saw a locum just to repeat my antidepressants, and she was very good. It was a young girl, not long qualified, and she said, well, why aren't we treating you? you've got a treatable condition. And I said, well, surely that's a question for you, not me. But you're not, and I wish you were. And she said, well, listen, I think there's a lot we can do for you. Have you ever considered EMDR? And at the time, I was pretty peed off, really. And I said, well, look, I've had this counselling that I've talked to you about, and to be honest, it don't help me. So what's the point? And she said, well, give this a run. This is a bit different. I know the lady who'll be treating you. She deals with a lot of Army veterans. She'll be very much on a level. Go and see her and do one. If we can get one agreed for you, just do one session. And if it doesn't work, stop. So I went and saw this lady up in who was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Laid it on the line with me, really. We did the one session, and it was an instant changer for me. It really was. I came home and thought, my God, it's the stuff that has been troubling me for years that I cannot remember properly.
Yeah.
So that was the big intervention, really.
Yeah. So what was different between that counsel? Obviously, I don't want to go into too much detail, but what was the difference between that one and, is it because they've lived with PTSD themselves, or?
No, I think it was two things. I think she understood a lot better what I was talking about. She was just more on the level, but it's also just the process itself. I mean, you can, if you want to ask me more detailed things, you can do. But what I did with my EMDR was just to go through the index incidents, the troubling incidents, and we would deal with them one session at a time, where you repeat, and she would do, they do a thing with their fingers, don't they?
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked. I got to the point where the incident I talked to you about with the sword, I'd gone from, as a flashback, it would be like a piece of cine film. For me, it would start and stop, and I had no control over that, whatever, whether I was sitting on the toilet, having a shower, out with my partner, whatever. Through the EMDR, and within one session, I got to that as being like seeing it through fog. Well, session 2, I came home, I couldn't remember it. So it was amazing, mate. Really, it was a total life changer.
Wow. No, that's really nice to hear, because obviously the messages I see, and not just on Facebook and on other stuff as well. Sometimes like, no, I've tried that, and that's it. You can never get them back in the system. And I know there's so many charities. Obviously, everyone knows there's Samaritans. Give us a shout. There's so many PTSD charities, and there's pretty much a charity and a service what will help out anybody, isn't it? Really, but it's
there is. Yeah, and I tried the military charities. I mean, in my case, I had gone to combat stress and various people like that and said, look, I'm ex-police, I'm not armed forces, can you help me? And they were all very good, but they all said no. It's not within our remit. Everybody that I spoke to gave me pointers, but no. And at that time, there was no specific police PTSD organisation.
Is there one now? Because I must admit, there was somebody else. Obviously, I can't say name, but there was somebody else who's, and I sent them. I just had a Google, and we only mention charities or services if they've been mentioned by a government service, or if they're actually a registered charity. We don't ever recommend people, like, there's no point in me saying, I'll speak to Tim, he's a retired copper and whatever else, if you're not verified. But anyway, I digress. But even now, it was this year. I think a lot more recent than I thought it was. And I was Googling stuff for this person. There was literally no one.
I don't know of anybody still. I don't know of anybody. No.
Which you think, so does it, because the second, what would frustrate me in your circumstance, again, I don't want to trigger you anything like that, is if you come up to me and said PTSD, I'd presume you're in the forces.
Yeah.
Did that ever undermine?
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens still all the time. It's constantly, if I say to people, oh yeah, I'm retired with PTSD, oh, you've been in the army? No. Yeah, it happens again and again and again.
And how do you deal with that?
I'm always honest with people because, for two reasons. Because I am just an honest person, but I think also because it is important to fly the flag for emergency services. These are people who are not getting the treatment, as you've inferred, that there are not recognised bodies dealing with them. And generally speaking, people are very good. I have found that the only guy I had a problem with, there was a guy who was ex-Royal Marine who really had a big attitude issue about it. I bumped into it. That became problematic. And his line was like, oh, well, police get PTSD sitting in the garden. And I reached a point of thinking, well, I'm not going to persuade you. So that's all right. We agreed to differ.
Yeah.
But yes, it is a problem. Absolutely, it is. And I think, for me, where it does kind of boil my pea a little bit is that I think there is a big issue in the emergency services of lack of recognition on the part of the organisations themselves, and this perpetuates it. They are able to say, actually, we don't have a big issue with PTSD. We're not failing these people. We are providing adequate support and care, and I think arguably they're not. So there's a circle there really, and it's not a good circle.
Yeah, well, hopefully it will slowly change. I think that's why with Man Up, we're not scared to talk to pretty much anybody and just say it how it is.
I totally agree, mate. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the
And
things I like about the organisation is that you do that. It's good.
yeah, no, thank you. Because you also, because obviously I know time's getting on. Bloody hell, that's flown out already. Because I know with you, part of your, I don't want to sound all hippie, but one of your healing process, you organise walks for people and stuff, don't you?
I do, yeah. I run a series of wellbeing walks. I take people out for a walk and a chat if they want to have a chat. If not, that's fine. We can just walk. There are guys I've been out with and walked in almost in silence. I take people around. I go around Alton Water. I do some walking at Felixstowe. And I'm happy to take people out. If there are guys who watch this who would like to come for a walk, that's fine. Contact the page, ping something up, and we'll arrange a walk.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, what I'll do is I'll tag you in everything as well. But you've just said something which is really valuable, and I've seen this with other healthcare people. I don't want to say a healthcare worker because I'm not one. I run a charity, but I'm not a healthcare worker. Just someone who gives us a shit, I guess. But it's just where I'm going. This way is I've run events and I've also joined other people's events via Man Up and even my own stuff. And sometimes when it's about mental health, you'll sometimes get that person who just doesn't want to talk. And I'm actually quite happy to go, do you know what? That's fine.
Yeah, me too. I agree. Yeah.
But I think that's where sometimes some people I think sometimes you can care too much. And be a bit pushy with that person. So do you know what? If anyone ever organises stuff, or I don't know, there's a guy who's just being a bit strange, and they come around your house for the first time in 6 months, or they come on a walk, whatever, doesn't matter, and they don't want to talk to you, or they're just being a bit quiet. Just remember, at least they're out.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And what I say to people is really simple. These are my own kind of rules about my walks. Is that you will not go home feeling worse. Whatever happens, you will not go home feeling worse. Yeah. I'm not going to push you into disclosing anything you don't want to talk about. If you don't want to talk about those problems, we're just two guys having a walk. That's it. It's fine. No, and also whatever happens on the walk stays on the walk.
Yeah.
I agree. There are people who don't want to talk. They're not ready to, and that's okay. We just, we walk around, and I sometimes think, well, I'll probably see you again, and maybe you might want to spill the beans a bit, and they often do. But you've got to let them lead themselves, I think, about whether they're ready or not.
Well, yeah, it's trust at the end of the day, isn't it? It's absolute trust. So just before we come to a close, I think you've already answered, to be honest. If somebody's watching this video, if someone is watching this video and they can, and I don't know, hopefully it's not triggering stuff, but it is what it is. Sometimes it does happen. If they're sitting there thinking, I can relate to this guy, I don't like it, what would you say to that person?
It's a good question, really. I would say,
we can't give advice.
You can change it. We all have that ability inside ourselves. The biggest single thing that helped me, this will sound like really sort of, I don't know, a little bit hippie kind of shit, but it's the truth, is acceptance. You have to accept what's happened to you, because if you don't accept it, you can't move on. But it's happened. It's part of your life. It's part of your picture. So you begin with acceptance, because acceptance lets you build on to the next stage. And I think seek help. That's my single message would be, however you do it, whoever you do it with, reach out, get some support, get some help, whether it's your doctor, whether it's your mates, whether it's an organization, maybe like Combat Stress. Just reach out for that hand, because it will be there, and that will help pull you up, and then you can move on.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that there is always someone who would listen. I think sometimes you may have to go to a couple of people.
Absolutely true.
But there is always somebody there who will listen and won't be judgmental.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Tim, that was a good call, mate. Right,
my pleasure. It's a pleasure to do it, mate, and I hope it helps people out.
I hope so too. Let me just hit the whole record button thingy, but you bear me 1 second.